So the legislature typically meets every 2 years in Nevada. We're one of 4 states that has a biennial legislative session. So that means every other year. Other states do annual sessions, are a lot more frequent than ours. But we pass a 2-year budget instead of a 1-year budget. The problem is when we have a situation like the pandemic that's just completely changed the course of the entire budget for the foreseeable future, they need to make an adjustment, and they're not scheduled to go back into Carson City and figure things out until next February, and the budget doesn't pass until June. So there's basically a year left in this budget cycle that they need to sort of readjust everything. So a special session is when the legislators come back to Carson City for a limited time, not the 120 days that they usually convene for, and try to make whatever adjustments are needed sort of on an emergency basis.
So there are 2 ways a special session can be called. The way that's done historically is that whoever the governor is can issue a call for a special session where they will set the date. In that call, it'll usually be through a proclamation, and it will have a list of topics that the legislature will be required to focus on, so they can't kind of sneak in or deal with any other issues during that special session. And then in this last decade, the legislature adopted a rule change that allows them to call themselves into a special session through a 2/3 vote.
There have been a couple special sessions during my almost 1 decade in Nevada. We've seen a special session in 2014 to try to bring Tesla here and create a tax incentive structure that would attract Tesla to Nevada. We saw one in 2016. It was trying to pass an incentive package to bring the Raiders to Nevada. There was also a special session in the year 2013. It was a weird one because the legislature had adjourned itself sine die and realized it had forgotten to process 2 bills. So they called a special session at something like 6 in the morning, the morning after they were supposed to be done, reconvened for, just maybe a couple hours, and it was all over. There have been other special sessions. I believe during the recession, there were some special sessions to readjust the budget. So there have just been a couple over the years. Riley, am I missing any main ones?
No, you got most of them. I think the ones that are probably the most analogous to the ones that is coming up in July were the ones in 2008. There was a 1-day special session in June 2008 to deal with a $1.2 billion shortfall. That sounds familiar. And then there was another one in December to address another $340 million shortfall. And that was all through the Great Recession and dealing with the budget there.
Well, I think one of the things they're going to have to approve a portion of the budget cuts that they need to make to balance the budget. That's one thing that's different from Nevada legislature as opposed to Congress, is that we cannot deficit spend. We can't essentially print money. We have to have as much spending as there is money essentially in the bank. So we have to cut the budget when there's a problem. We can't just kind of deficit spend or kind of create, stimulus projects. So a lot of it's going to be readjusting the budget. But there's also actively people trying to get other things onto the agenda because the Black Lives Matter protests have been a major focal point in the last few weeks. There's an effort to try to get policing reform of some sort onto the agenda. We don't know what that's going to look like. There's been obviously broad strokes discussions about what people want, but that is still definitely to be determined.
So during a normal legislative session, the lawmakers will break off into committees that'll have regularly scheduled meetings, and then they'll meet for floor sessions to kind of process bills. Because a special session is so focused on narrow topics, they typically won't break into these committees. They'll meet as what's called a committee of the whole. So they'll usually just stay in their big legislative chambers. They won't go into a hearing room or anything like that. They'll hear testimony, but it's a lot more focused. And another part of it is that a lot more stuff is done kind of behind closed doors in caucus rooms to figure out any kind of last minute hang-ups or issues that might have come up. So typically what we've seen are very long nights, very long meetings, and then long periods of kind of nothing really publicly going on, but a lot of debate and discussion happening behind closed doors.
And you're typically seeing far fewer bills than you see during a regular legislative session. During a regular 120-day session, you'll see upwards of 1,000 bills, but in a special session, sometimes you see 2 or 3. So it's very streamlined, and all the elements are usually just in a handful of bills. We really don't know. So with a regular session, there is a strict timeline. It goes 120 days. It has a clear start date and a clear finish date. With the special session, we'll know when the governor calls it, what day he wants it to start, but we don't know exactly how long it can be. Like I've said in the past, special sessions have sometimes taken just a couple hours. They've taken 1 day, they've taken 5 days. I think way back in the earlier part of the 2000s, there was a special session that was way longer. So we're not sure. I think we're hopeful that it'll be within the time frame of a week or less.
And one other consideration is cost. I don't have the most recent numbers in front of me, but I believe for the 2016 and 2015 special sessions, even having just 1 day of a special session costs somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 per day. So as you add more things to the agenda, the call to a special session, and if they meet for longer and longer, that's just costs that the state has to make up somewhere else. And if you're already trying to cut the budget by $1.2 billion, you don't want to kind of add on top of that by meeting unnecessarily long. Those costs come from things like overtime, normal salary for legislative police, janitorial staff, which they've hired extra this session due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's the other consideration, is that, they want to kind of get in there, get it done, and then get out as quickly as possible without having to break the bank.